I do have to correct you a little bit. I am a weird writer. I try to control it as best I can, but I mean, I write sonnets for Pete's sake.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
But I want to thank you, Rex, for asking me, and Mojava for having us, and compliment Mark and Deborah and Shar on their performances earlier this evening. I do write sonnets. It's not all I write. I write a lot of other things. Like most writers and most poets, most of what I write is unpublished. I don't know what the odds, the percentage would be, but I probably have, I do know I have 7 book manuscripts unpublished and not sent out at the moment. So I've got a sizable backlog. And that ranges from longer things to my favorite form actually is the quatrain, the self-contained quatrain, which stands as a poem, 4 lines. But I'm going to read from this book of sonnets tonight. It's called The Sledders. And I will do a little bit of introduction to each one. The first poem I'm going to read is called Simple Gesture. And this is based on a black and white photograph of my wife when she was just a little over a year old. I think the back of the photograph says Francie 14 months or something like that. But in the photograph, she's reaching out for a poppy bud. And you can, you know, some of those old photographs, there's a little bit of a mussed hair flying up in the breeze and that sort of thing. It's, I'm fascinated by those kinds of things. So this is a memory of something I never had or never did. And so I'm participating in this with her, which makes it sound like a love poem. Maybe it is, I'm not sure. Nah. Simple gesture. The child you were at 1 year reaches out, right hand a blur, to touch a poppy bud. The world in black and white's not yet in focus, but on your left, about at shoulder height, one poppy's satin crepe flares out in red. The sunlight sprawls in long grass at your feet, paying its daily homage, and one shaft plays with the light breeze in your light brown hair. So here you are, fingers of your left hand curled delicately under round a shadow, your cotton dress and collar poised with you at the beginning of another day, your spirit filled with wonder at the morning. This simple gesture, all there is to say. So that's a memory of something I didn't do. This is a memory of something I remember very well. It's probably one of my first 2 or 3 memories. And it took place when I was 3 years old. I may be 3 years and 4 months old or something on that, I don't know. It took place in Shreveport, Louisiana, where I lived at the time. My dad was in the FBI during the war, and we had moved from New Orleans to Shreveport, and this is one of my first things that showed that I had entered the world and was a percipient citizen of that world. This is called Discovering Gravity. I'm 3 years old as memory begins. Shreveport, Louisiana is the scene. I'm in my stroller at the grocery store when Mother wheels me past a row of bins and round the corner where the gaps between the glass jars towering above the floor let in a broad sweep of fluorescent light. The beets they house are ruby red and bright. Lacking a grasp of physics, I reach out, plucking a jar that rests at just my height. Slowly the pyramid of glass gives way, then quickly caves and shatters. Fear and delight fill me at once. Mother, however, shouts my first and middle names in her dismay. All of my memories from Shreveport are of little mini catastrophes. I'll give you just one more. Somewhere I had gotten a hold of a little metal saw that actually had a space for the hand, but of course that was just the balls of my thumb and my forefinger. And it was about, 2 3/4 inches long. And I took that to church one Sunday. And while the sermon was going on, I began to test it on the pew. And my dad heard this. And I'll bet I was 1/4 of an inch into the pew before that got taken from me. I never saw it again. Somewhere is a little toy saw that I still miss. We live on South 25th Street in the near South neighborhood, and on South 25th between Franklin and Sumner Street, the police used to close off that street for the kids in the neighborhood to go sledding. And this is a poem about that, but it's based on a painting of that by Dwight Kirsch, who used to be the head of the painting department at the University of Nebraska back in the 30s and 40s. And we were having coffee with a neighbor, and she owned that painting, and seeing that reminded me of doing similar things, although I didn't do that there. After the book was published and I gave her a copy, she gave us the painting, by the way, which was really nice, really nice. So I called the poem "The Sledders." A little down the street from where we sat, sipping coffee and eating chocolate cake, and here the years flew by and nothing flat, so that I had to do a double take to take it in. That painting on the wall in which 3 boys on sleds sped down the hill through lucid half-light, making me recall my own rough-mittened fingers and the chill of those long-vanished winter afternoons. Their one-time peer who only watched them now in this milieu of cups and clinking spoons. The limbs above the street picked out in snow as if pure line were all the light discerned. My sweat, like theirs, once froze until it burned. Come to think of it, quite a few of these poems are about little mishaps. I'm not sure how old I was in this one. I didn't know what to call this one. It took place on St. Patrick's Day, and I called it Luck of the Irish. And I do have some Scots-Irish in my ancestry. So, Luck of the Irish. It was St. Patrick's Day, and I was late, heading for home now on my speeding bike, aware that from the side each whirring spoke helped spin a wheel of fortune in the light, a blur like bits of ice turned into sleet, revolving in the mild March morning sun, when to my right I saw the car come on. Sudden as snow slipped from a roof of slate, it loomed up in my sight's periphery, then lightly touched my back wheel as it swerved and threw me past the handlebars through air onto the hand that slid me to the curb. The doctor chuckled at the irony. A green twig fragment fractured in his care. True story, I wouldn't make that up. Don't know how old I was in a lot of these. In Possession, this next one is called. It's a memory of one summer trip to Minnesota. Something almost Flemish about that water, a golden brown but clear into its depths. The plank ends of the dock a fading gray beside it, and a boat moored at the end. Something, it seems to me in looking back, about a murky bullhead on a stringer, one of those rope ones you could hardly see, so that the fish appeared to scull in place. Something, the details start to widen now, about white wooden clapboards on the side of that inn or tavern where my dad had stopped, a neon beer sign staring out through glass. Late in the afternoon, I drinking deep of everything I saw, now mine to keep. One of the places where I grew up was across the street from Prescott School. I lived at 1936 South 22nd. And somehow or other I managed, in the 2.5 years that I went to Prescott, I managed to be late to school about a dozen times. I still don't know how I worked that out, but I did. I was a little drifty, a little dreamy, I think, as a child. Very, probably indulged, probably spoiled. Spent a lot of time to myself. But I think from an early age, we are who we are, I think. And I've definitely always been an introvert. I lived a block away from the house that Lauren Isley lived in when he went to Lincoln High on 23rd Street, just above Franklin. That is just south of Franklin. And so this poem is about that. His house was on this side of the alley. The house in question in the poem was on this side of the alley. And here's the little narrative of my relationship to Lauren Isley. Near one of Lauren Isley's boyhood homes, I shoot out a neighbor's window. It was in the alley out behind his house. I waited with a borrowed BB gun, borrowed meaning handed to me there, and sighted down the barrel with the dare of my much older playmate in my ears. An 8-foot length of plate glass glared at me. My aim, though inexperienced, was true, as the small pellet struck and then was through. The shattered glass fell inward to the floor and disappeared like the great block of ice that turned into a swimming catfish once in Lauren's basement. I felt like a dunce. My friends skedaddled, all the blame on me. My father paid, but left the shame to me. That reference to the swimming catfish and The Immense Journey, when he cuts out the catfish from the ice on the Platte River and brings it home and throws it in an aluminum wash tub, and then comes down and finds it later that it had thawed and the catfish is swimming around. Amazing. I did a lot of dumb stuff too. I mean, this is a really dumb thing. This one's called Crosstown Underground in the storm sewer system. Where 22nd intersected Sewell, we slid the rusted manhole cover back, descending hand and foot into the dark. The last one down that slid the cover back. It made a grating sound, as if a spark might leap up at any moment to the stack of our naivete, such a ready fuel to light our passage from that vestibule. Down there, the dark grew light, the water sound leading us on a mile or more due west. And if there was no focus to our quest, there was no question of where we were bound. What I remember best is how that vault secured our voices every time we'd halt. And I'm pretty sure I wouldn't do what I did in this next poem, knowing what I know today.
Yeah.
That could, most of us probably have that view of experience sometime or other. This one's called Empty-Handed, and a subtitle, Arkansas. This was Lake Conway in Arkansas where this happened, and I got out of the boat. My dad said, go over to the side and push the boat. And so I, kicked and propelled the boat because the engine had died and it was raining. But that put me out as cypresses are the favorite hangout in southern lakes of water moccasins, and this was not a bright thing for me to have done. Empty-handed. The rain began to fall that afternoon just as the motor sputtered, coughed, and failed. The small drops pocked the water steadily, and then it was over the side with me to swim behind the rowboat's stern and push. My entry made the cypresses' gray trunks or their reflections bob and settle back. That water was the nearest thing to black that I have ever seen. I kicked and pushed. Meanwhile, my father worked the creaking oars. I saw the droplets spangle on the blades, fall silver with that shininess that fades, and then the dock rode slowly into view. Our stringers jangled clear back to the car. Those old metal stringers. And they were an amazing sound accompaniment to an unsuccessful fishing trip.
Did your father let you do this?
What's that?
Did your father let you do this?
Yeah, well, he's told me to go over the side. Yeah, he volunteered me for a lot of things. Yeah.
Well, you'd have nothing to write about otherwise.
This next poem has what's sometimes referred to as a running title. That is, you read the title right into the first line. And so the title is Therefore. This is a love poem, if you're wondering somewhere along the way. I call her Love here.
Are you blushing?
Mushy. I don't know.
Yes, you are.
A little bit.
Really? Okay. Therefore, let us love be ourselves and nothing less. Let that be adequate to all occasions. And let the flecks of gold in your brown eyes bespeak the unplumbed riches of your soul. Let them bring you the world in soft surprise, that everywhere you look may recreate the brimming wonder of a learning child. Let wrath be turned back by your answer mild, and every supplication find a voice to stutter its petition in your heart, and yes resound as love's most willing choice. May everything you love be kind to you, and may these words eschew the taciturn to let you know with what deep love I burn. Mostly tongue-tied is what I've been most of my life when it comes to speaking about feelings. I guess I'm a typical man in that regard. I'm not sure. But of course, you do lose strategically a little advantage in expressing your love completely, right? But even if you get an ace on that serve, you're going to have to play a tiebreaker later on.
Oh, that love. That's another love.
Anyway. I went to the University of Texas for 1 year, and we lived for about 6 months in the country south of Austin. So this is a poem that comes out of that experience. Austin is one of the creepy, crawly critters havens in the United States. And I mean, there are scorpions and see lots and lots and lots of big rattlesnakes, coral snakes, which don't inject you with poison. They chew and kind of slobber on you, and so you have to have boots on, to handle coral snakes. But anyway, I'm out here tromping along in the Texas countryside. This is called a Texas idyll. Fishing in clear green stone-bound water in the hill country south of Austin, catching a rock bass every now and then. I spent a lazy hour beside the creek where limestone worn away to form a pool. It was maybe 20 yards across there. Above the current on the other side, a limestone bluff was topped by cumulus. And then a sudden movement caught my eye. A water moccasin slid down a ledge into the water, swam out to a tree, showed its cotton palate, flicked its tongue, slid back into the water, scaled the stone. Dead silence in its wake when it was gone. I mean, all of the birds stopped singing, everything knows that thing is moving around there. So that was, that poem, every time I read it, reminds me of Emily Dickinson. Never met the fellow attended or alone without a tighter breathing, zero at the bone. So that's just what happens. Outside our bedroom window there in the country in Austin, one day, the guy who did the groundwork for our landlady was riding his tractor mower, and I looked out the window, and he was hauling a 6-foot rattlesnake out, a dead one, out from underneath his mower. So there was that kind of thing, But Texans are cool with it. They're not bothered by it. They just handle it as, one of the ways things life work. One of the way life works is what I'm trying to say. This next one I had a lot of fun with. I let myself get into the vernacular in the, which seems very sonnet-y.
Sonnety.
Use the word ain't here in the first line. So this is called A Glossary of Eastern Nebraska Creek Names. It gives you a reasonable expectation of a very serious poem.
Okay.
It's okay?
Okay.
All right. Big Weedy means ain't running too much water. Bone means that it is almost always dry. Plum means the namer saw a bush in flower and lost that it runs out beneath the sky. Union divides the town of Madison. Maple is lined for miles with cottonwoods. Turkey, and you're in business with a trot line. There's places where the fishing's always good. Sand lets the light down through the clearest water. The bed of dry with undergrowth is choked. Spring intersects a stretch of virgin prairie, and herons feed along both salt and oak. Though there is always more than meets the eye, such names ring true as you go driving by. Once you start playing around in a poem, you start playing around, get something going, it's amazing. You surprise yourself often. Oh golly, that's true. Union does run through the town of Madison, and it divides it up, and so on and so forth. It's amazing how many of those things, as far as I know, those are all true statements, but they're kind of lighthearted statements. I think somehow or other, we grow up with the idea that poetry can't be lighthearted. But yeah, it certainly can. And I think I'll finish up with a poem called For Instance, and there is an epigraph, a quotation at the beginning of the poem from William Least Heat Moon's book, Prairie Earth. I don't know how many of you like his work, but Blue Highways is one of my favorite all-time books. How did Little Dime Box, Texas get its name? Well, he tells you in that little...
It's good to know. I've driven by it.
Little Dime Box, Texas got its name because the postmaster didn't bother to be in the post office. And so if you wanted to mail a letter, you left a dime with your letter in the little box on the side of the post office. And he made a profit on that. If you left, see the little dime box? And, you know, he did. He'd make a 7 cents profit at that time, because when it was named, it was a stamp, a first-class stamp was 3 cents. So he made a 7 cent profit. Okay, that sounds good. Anyway, the quotation is this: I learned a prairie secret. Take the numbing distance in small doses and gorge on the little details that beckon. You know, this big sky country. And what I think Nebraskans always notice when they go back east, for example, is where is the sky? You're driving along a road and there's just a patch of it overhead. You don't see over the horizon the way you do here. Consider these in blossom by the road. Some poppy mallows, several clumps of them, bent over in the wind on hairy stems as if their pollen were a heavy load. Sprung overnight where no one saw them sowed, their petals fluttering like sails they trim. Each slowly stands up on its stem again from paying its obeisance as it bowed. Some slight subservience becomes the proud. And when the wind slacks and the sky grows dim, and a chill moment passes over them, as the mallows feel the shadow of a cloud, they place their faith in the return of light. It will come back, grown warm again and bright. Thank you.